Good morning, ladies. Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Tanya Shir. We're studying Shaar, hayichud ve'emunah, and we're in the middle of Perek Zayin of chapter 7. If you have a Hebrew Tanya, we're on Daf Pei Beis Amud Beis. We're on page 164. If you're using the lessons in Tanya, we are on page, here we go, chapter 7. We're on page 900, and we're going to start from 915, where it says V'hinei afal pi. Okay, so let's review very briefly, and then we'll continue with Hashem's help. So Perek Zayin, the Alter Rebbe starts to talk about. In Perek Zayin, the Alter Rebbe talks about the concept of Hashem's malchus. The expression the Alter Rebbe uses is very strongly worded. He says, Yadu ala koil, Alter Rebbe says, it's known to everybody that the purpose for Hashem's creation of the world is for the sake of His galus malchuso yizborech, for the revelation of Hashem's malchus. Now, we discussed last week that in Chassidus there's a lot of discussion about this concept of malchus, of Hashem, this attribute of Hashem's malchus, and how on the one hand, malchus is the lowest of all the spheres, the lowest of all of the levels, the aspects of Hashem, and how on the other hand, malchus contains within itself a certain connection or a certain quality, a certain dafka, something about malchus touches the very essence of the king. Again, we spoke about this a little bit last week. What's relevant here, what the Alter Rebbe wants here in Perek Zayin of Shaar, hayichud ve'emunah, is that in order to have this type of malchus-like relationship, in order for Hashem to be king, this necessitates specifically bedafka, a world in which Hashem's presence is not naturally manifest and revealed. And the mashal the Alter Rebbe gives is if you had a person who had many sons and many ministers, he wouldn't be able to be king over the sons and ministers because they're too close to him. So it is with Hashem, bedafka, to reveal this element of malchus, this malchus of Hashem. It necessitates a world in which at least naturally or sort of by default doesn't feel its own unity with Hashem. Okay, that's what the Alter Rebbe explained at the beginning of Perek Zayin. The Alter Rebbe also told us that this element of Hashem's malchus is connected with the only name of Hashem that we actually use nowadays, which is referred to as Shem Adnai, or Aleph Daled Nun Yud, the one we say in Brochas and in Davening. This is the name of Hashem which is associated with malchus, right? Like as we say every time we make a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. As opposed to the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which we don't pronounce. It's the way Hashem's name is written, but it isn't pronounced. So as opposed to the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, so Yud Kei Vav Kei refers to that element, that aspect of Hashem, which is beyond, which is higher than Zman u'Makom, the Alter Rebbe says, higher than time and space. So again, I forgot to mention this part. Malchus, the element of Malchus, the Shem Adnai, this is responsible for the world as we know it being a world of time and space. Because again, this is necessary in order for there to be this Malchus-like relationship between Hashem and the world. And this, on the other hand, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is higher than time and higher than space. Right, like the Alter Rebbe says, Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech, Hashem Yimlech, etc. The name Yud Kei Vav Kei is higher than this, and this represents, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei represents the essence of Hashem, in which there is no connection to the limitations of time and space in the world as we know it. All right. The last thing we learned last week is that these two names of Hashem, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is, let's say, for the sake of this discussion, a name of Hashem, a reality, a world of godliness, in which the limitations of time and space, as we know them, limitations of time and space do not exist. And the name Adnai, the other name of Hashem, which is responsible for a world in which there is limitation and limitation by definition. Limitation by definition is concealment of Hashem. So these two names, Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei and Shem Adnai, they do merge, they do come together, and they come together in two ways. The name Adnai, the lower level of Hashem is the lower name of Hashem, the lower level is elevated. It merges with the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, a world in which none of the limitations exist. That's one. That's called Yichuda Ilaa, a higher level of unity where the limitations of the world, they melt away, they dissolve into a reality of godliness, which knows no limitations at all. And then on the other hand, there's the other element of the synthesis, of the merging of these two names, called Shiluv Shem Yud-Kei Vav-Kei Ba'adnai, where the name of Hashem, that reality of Hashem which is beyond time and space, it exists. It's manifest even within time and space. This is what we learned last week. I was just thinking very briefly of a shtickle moshel for this, right? So we're talking about these two ideas. We're talking about two types of unity between Hashem and existence, between that which is higher than worlds and worlds, that which is the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei and the name Adnai. So I was thinking maybe of a shtickle moshel for these two different types of unity, and both are true, right? Both are true. So in the relationship between a chassid and a rebbe, you have l'chayra, an analogy for these two ideas. Where on the one hand, we would say when you talk about the relationship between a chassid and a rebbe, so you have these two ideas. On the one hand, you would say there's the relationship from the chassid to the rebbe, right? Where the chassid comes to his rebbe, and when he experiences some type of closeness or being in the presence of his rebbe, physically or spiritually, so there's the sense that the chassid has that all of his struggles and that all of his challenges, his physical challenges, his spiritual challenges, whatever it is that he deals with in his own life, in his own day-to-day level, it's incredibly petty, and it's incredibly insignificant, and it's incredibly small, because in the presence of the Rebbe, all of this stuff seems to melt away into insignificance, right? Great Hasidim would sometimes even have a difficult time even physically talking in the presence of their Rebbe. It was like, in the presence of the Rebbe, what are you going to say that's important or that's significant in any way? It's like there's a sense where whatever it was that I was carrying until now, whatever it was that I was dealing with until now, in the presence of a Rebbe, it's like it ceases to exist. Because we've come face to face with the ultimate truth, with the ultimate godliness, it's like you've brought a candle to the sun. Yeah, you brought a candle to the sun, so the candle, it sort of melts away. There's the sense where the chassid feels his own neshama dissolving into the neshama of his Rebbe, into the Torah of his Rebbe, into the being of his Rebbe, and it's like he doesn't exist anymore. Very powerful experience, very integral to the connection between a chassid and a Rebbe, and it's only half. It's only half. On the other hand, you have the other half. What's the other half? The other half is where the Rebbe invests himself into every detail of the chassid's life. And the Rebbe is interested and does want to know and does give brachas and guidance, and the Rebbe touches the chassid in every one of his challenges and every one of, whatever it is, his physical challenges and his spiritual challenges, etc., where the chassid can, afterwards, when the chassid walks away, the chassid can feel, before the chassid walking away. So from the chassid's perspective, there's this sense where he feels like he's dissolving and melting away in the reality of his Rebbe. And from the Rebbe's perspective, there's the sense where he's invested into every specific detail of the chassid's life. All right, it's my own mashal, but it maybe in some ways it fits here. Now, what happens when the chassid walks away from his Rebbe? So actually, the chassid needs to carry both things. The chassid needs to carry both things. On the one hand, the chassid needs to remember that in the presence of, when he was standing in front of his Rebbe, in the presence of ultimate truth, So all of the stuff, all of the pettiness, all of the things he was worried about, and all the rest of it, it didn't even exist. He couldn't even remember any of it while he was standing in the presence of his Rebbe. It was like deleted from his brain because of how insignificant it is. On the one hand. On the other hand, when the chassid walks away, he has to carry the other part of it too. He has to remember that the specifics of his life are important, and that his Rebbe is invested in him and in every detail of his life, etc., etc. And so it is with the Eibashter and the world, where we have both of this dual reality, if you will, these two types. The Alter Rebbe calls them Yichuda Tataah and Yichuda Ilaa. Yichuda Tataah and Yichuda Ilaa. What Yichuda Tataah, the lower type of Yichud, and Yichuda Ilaa, the higher type of Yichud. It's actually confusing how these two types work, but here's the way the Alter Rebbe explains it. He says, when we talk about how all the limitations of the world, Zman, Umokim, etc., all of it comes from Malchus. And the Malchus of Hashem is united, is one, let's say it dissolves into the ultimate truth of the Eibashter himself. So we talk about how really all of the specifics, all the details of existence, they all melt away in the presence. If it would just be revealed, if the truth of Hashem would be revealed, we would be able to see it. Now we can't see it, but the truth is that it all melts away in the oneness of Hashem. That's Yichuda Tataah. That's the way the world is nullified within Hashem. And then there is what's called Yichuda Ilaa. Am I getting it wrong? Yeah. And then I got it right. And then the other direction, when the Eibashter, we say Hashem is one with the world. Hashem is present in the world. Hashem is here in every specific detail and in every limitation. Hashem, with all of his essence, is to be found in every detail, in every presence, in every element, in every limitation of the world. This is called Yichuda Tataah, or the unity of Yud Kei Vav Kei in the name Adonai. Okay, so I'm going from the words V'hinei afal pi shehu yisborech l'maylo. Again, it's on the bottom of page Pei Beis. Afal pi shehu yisborech l'maylo me'amokim v'azman. And again in the English, it's on page, what do we say, 915. V'hinei afal pi shehu yisborech l'maylo me'amokim v'azman. Although the Eibashter himself is higher than space and higher than time, nevertheless, we wouldn't be able to say that the Eibashter is not present in time, even though the Eibashter is beyond time and space. We wouldn't be able to say that the Eibashter is not in time and space. That would also be a limitation. Nevertheless, Hashem himself is to be found in space and time. That means Hashem is united with his element of Malchus. Hashem unites with his Malchus. That from Malchus comes Mokum and Zman. And this is referred to as Yichuda Tataah, meaning that level of Hashem that's higher than time and space, that comes into time and space. Shiluv Shem Havaya B'Adnas Baruch Hu. And Alter articulates this very strong expression, very powerful, strong words. Dain, what this means? That the very essence of Hashem, Anikra B'Shem Ein Sof Baruch Hu, that is referred to with the term Ein Sof Baruch Hu, no limitations, may be blessed. Molayas Kol Ha'aretz Mamash, fills the whole world. Mamash Bizman Umokim, in the limitations of the world, space and time. In all of these limitations, Hashem's essence is to be found. Ki b'shamayim imal, because in the heavens above, u'ba'aretz, and on the earth, u'ladalat sitron, and in all four directions, hakoil, everything is mole, everything is saturated, me'oren sof baruch hu, with the infinite being of Hashem, b'shaveh mamash. The same, in exactly the same way that Hashem is to be found in the heavens above, he's to be found in the earth below. through the element of Malchus, right? Through the element of Malchus. So through this, Hashem Himself is united with every part, with every detail of time and space, and every limitation that exists. Malchus also serves as a tzimtzum. A concealment, to conceal Hashem's lights, that we don't see it. So that time and space should not be nullified from their existence. They shouldn't cease to exist. In which case, if the Hashem Himself were to be revealed, right? If the Eibishter Himself were to reveal Himself, so then time and space as limitations would cease to exist. That's also not the Ratzon of Hashem. The Ratzon of Hashem is that they should remain, they should exist as time and space, as limitations, and within those limitations, the very essence of Hashem is to be found and is present. All right. So just mamish one word of explanation here. Just mamish one word. What does this mean when we say that Hashem's very essence, the essence of Hashem, is to be found in every specific detail, every limitation of time and space in the world as we know it? Hashem's essence is to be found there. So what could we say? What could we say that explains this? I mean, we're accustomed to thinking of Hashem as not being limited, right? We're accustomed to thinking of Hashem as having no limitations at all. And yet here we're insisting, that within every limitation that Hashem created, Hashem's presence is to be found. So in other words, what's accomplished by this? Why is the Alter Rebbe pushing this point? There's many different ways to explain it, but I'll just give you one of them. So you know how Kabbalah says, and Chassidus quotes this, that we cannot say, Kabbalah said, we cannot say that Hashem is only infinite. We cannot say that Hashem only has no limitations. Why? Because although it sounds a little bit like semantics, but if we say Hashem is only not limited, then that itself becomes a limitation. He's only not limited. And Hashem doesn't have any limitations at all. So if we want to truly express the true infinite nature of Hashem, we have to say that Hashem is both not limited and limited. Both. Because to say that He's just not limited would also be a limitation. So we have to say that He's both. Again, when you hear it the first couple of times, it sounds like semantics. Not limited. Limited, I mean, what do we even mean? But what Kabbalah is trying to say is that when we say Hashem is not limited, we mean that Hashem is really not limited. So any type of definition that we're going to put on this lack of limitation of Hashem, any way we're going to picture it, if we're going to picture it in a certain way, then that picture is going to be a limiting picture. Even if the picture we're going to put on it is that there's no picture. That's also a limitation. That's also a type of a picture, or that's also a type of some kind of a tziyah. So therefore we have to say, basically, like the Alter Rebbe is going to explain soon in this chapter, we have to be honest that it's not really possible for the human mind to grasp this. It's not possible. We have to just say the truth the way it is, that when we say that the Eibishter is not limited, it means He's not limited in such a way that He's not even limited to being not limited. He's also limited. Okay. Now, in that sense, when we say the Eibishter is, so to speak, limited, right? What do we mean? That He's actually limited? Chas v'sholom. If he's actually limited, then what have we achieved? We didn't want to say, in other words, we did not want to say that Hashem is not limited, because that's a limitation. So what are we going to say? We're going to say He's limited, and that's not a limitation. That's also a limitation. What we mean is that He's both. He's not limited to either one. He's not limited to not limited, and He's not limited to limited. All right, I don't want to get lost in the words. Kabbalah calls this bli gvul and gvul. Bli gvul, no limitation. Gvul, limitation. So when we say that the Eibishter also has gvul, when we say the Eibishter also has limitation, we don't mean that He's actually subject to the limitation. Quite the contrary. We mean that limitation is part of him. That because the Eibashter is the source of everything, and the source of everything, and the existence of everything, so everything that exists comes from Hashem, and in the language of Chassidus, everything that exists is also part of Hashem. So it's a similar kind of idea that Alter Rebbe is saying over here. We want Beferish to say both sides of this idea, and both sides are 100% true. On the one hand, we want to say that the truth of Elokus, the truth of godliness, is not the world the way we see it. The world the way we see it, the limitations, the time and space, the sense of, more than anything, the sense of self that we encounter in the world. This, on the one hand, we want to say this is not godliness. In order to be connected to godliness, you have to go out of your sense of self. You have to lose yourself. You have to lose yourself in order to be connected with Hashem, on the one hand. But that's only from our perspective. From our perspective, in order for us to connect to Hashem, we have to go out of our limitations. We have to go out of our ego. We have to go out of our own perceived selfishness, awareness of self, narcissism, etc., etc., etc. Chassidus says, yeah, that's all true, but that's only half. That's only the Chassid saying, in the presence of my Rebbe, I cease to exist. But what about the other side? But from the Eibashter's perspective, there isn't something here, in other words, before the Eibashter's perspective. From our perspective, there's an ego, there's a sense of self that we have to climb out of in order to connect to Hashem. That's us. But from the Eibashter's perspective, it's the other way around. From the Eibashter's perspective, the truth is nothing else exists besides for Hashem. And everything that exists within Hashem. So if there is a world, and it does have limitations, and these limitations are responsible for the fact that the world feels itself as an existence, then from the Eibashter's perspective, that's also necessary as part of the unity and the expression of the infinity of Hashem. The Malchus of Hashem, like Alter Rebbe says, the Malchus of Hashem needs a world that feels its own existence in order so that Hashem could be king over it. So from Hashem's perspective, when Hashem looks at a world that feels its own existence, it doesn't see a, so to speak, a gvul that's an actual limitation. It sees a gvul that's part of the infinite nature of Hashem. The midas, the malchus of Hashem necessitates a world that feels itself, that feels its own existence, in order to express the malchus of Hashem. Now, if the world will decide, I'm perfect just the way I am, right? I'm perfect just the way I am. After all, Hashem made me, and I'm one with Hashem. So then all of my limitations and my narcissism and all the rest of it, everything is good. Then that's also not going to work. That's also not the kavanah of Hashem. The kavanah of Hashem is not that the world should be comfortable and happy in its own sense of self. Chas v'sholom. The kavanah of Hashem is to create a world that feels itself, that feels its own existence, that should have to work on itself to make itself bottled to the Eibashter, and from the world's perspective should have to travel a journey in order to come to a unity with Hashem, and at the same time, from Hashem's perspective, all of this is all being experienced within a reality that's one with Hashem. In Alter Rebbe's words, in here in Tanya, the very essence of Hashem, which is Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which is completely unlimited, is to be present, is to be found Bizman U'Makom, in every detail of time and in every detail of space and in everything. All right, there's a lot to chew on over here, but anyways, this is what's written. Maybe another shtickle example for this. An educator, again, I'm thinking as I'm speaking, an educator who gives a student, who gives a Rav, who gives a Talmud, not just a shear, but a Rav that gives a Talmud tools, real tools on how to learn on their own. A Rav who gives a Talmud a shear, not just to explain the Gemara, but to teach the Talmud how to learn Gemara on their own. So later, when the Talmud goes and studies on their own things that they didn't learn from their teacher, based on the tools that the teacher gave them. So on the one hand, it's true to say, what do you mean? This is the student on their own. This is the student on their own, trying to imitate their teacher, right? The student is trying to imitate. How would the teacher learn this Gemara? On the one hand. On the other hand, from the teacher's perspective, this is the teacher, the way the teacher has taught the student to study. So in the student's reality, it's like, I'm trying to imitate my teacher. In the teacher's reality, the teacher has empowered the student to learn the way the teacher learns. So the teacher has managed to invest himself and his own way of thinking, his own perspective, so deeply into the mind of the Talmud that even when the Talmud doesn't really hear his teacher teaching him, in fact, the Talmud has to try to imagine how would the teacher learn this if the teacher was here. Even that is also the teacher. The teacher has invested themselves in the student, so that the student should be able to do this even when the teacher isn't there. All right. A few more lines. Hine b'mashin isbor, based on all this that has been explained here, says the Alter Rebbe, Yuvan mashakosav ani avaya lo shanis. We can now understand. The pasuk says, quote, Ani Havaya, I am Hashem, says the pasuk. Lo shanisi, I haven't changed. Pirush, Chassidus explains, She'ein shum shinoi klal, that by Hashem there's no difference. K'moi shehoyo levadoi koydem briyas olam, just as Hashem existed alone before the world was created. Kachu levadei achas shenivra. So it is that Hashem is alone after the world was created. This is the meaning of the words, Atahu, you Hashem are the same. Before the world was created, and Atahu, you're the same after the world is created. Pirush, this means, Chulu. Pirush, nothing, as far as Hashem is concerned, nothing changed. Nothing changed. Before the world was created, and after the world was created, as far as Hashem is concerned, nothing. As far as Hashem is concerned, nothing changed. In Hashem's essence, nothing changed. How can we say nothing changed? Hashem created a world. Before the world didn't exist, and now the world did exist. How can we say nothing changed? Before Hashem was the only one, and now Hashem is not the only one. So on a simple level, it's not a question. Right? Hashem is, on a simple level, Hashem is not saying there's no world. There is a world. Hashem says, I didn't change. The world changed before the world didn't exist, and now the world does exist. Hashem says, but I didn't change. Chassidus says we refuse to accept that. What do you mean? If Hashem says there's no change between before the world was created and after the world is created, this means that actually nothing at all changed. Now, how can you say nothing changed? So Chassidus talks about this a lot. The answer is exactly what we're learning over here in Shaar Yichuda Ve'emunah. That all of existence that Hashem has brought into existence, everything that happened, it all takes place within the Eibishter himself. From Hashem's perspective, let's put it in these words. From Hashem's perspective, everything that transpires is all taking place within Hashem himself. Every single detail of creation, from the biggest to the smallest, it's all happening, it's all being experienced within a reality, within a world which is completely divine and godly. Last week at the end of this year, somebody asked, okay, so what do we take away from all of this practically? This is like this is the genesis here of the deepest concepts of Chabad Chassidus. So what do we want with this on a practical level? One of the things we want with this on a practical level is the importance of understanding of the concept of Hashgacha Pratis. We sometimes misunderstand Hashgacha Pratis. We sometimes think Hashgacha Pratis means. We sometimes mistakenly think Hashgacha Pratis means that Hashem is like some master puppeteer, right? You know what a puppeteer is? You put on a puppet show. The puppets are just basically gloves sitting on the puppeteer's hands. And he draws little faces on them. He goes like this with his hands. It makes it look like the puppets talk, right? But the puppeteer is manifesting voices and manifesting hand motions and hand gestures and all the rest of it. And the puppeteer is controlling everything. Everything. And what people see, right, on top of the curtain, is just puppets. But if you watch the puppets long enough, our eyes and our brains are limited. If you watch the puppets long enough, it starts to look like the puppets have some life of their own. It starts to look like the puppets are walking and talking and having all these emotional experiences and psychological conversations and yada, yada, yada. And really the puppets are just, they're dead objects. The master puppeteer sitting behind the curtain is the one who's moving the hands or pulling the strings and has even designed the puppets in the first place and doing all the stuff with the puppets to create this impression that there's this whole story going on. In reality, the whole thing is nicht gesteugen, nicht geflogen, it's a Bobbermeister. The puppets can't walk, the puppets can't talk, the puppets can't feel, the puppets can't nothing. The master puppeteer is just pretending. So some people understand Hashgacha Pratis like this, like the Eibishter is some master puppeteer. Right? We look around at a world, and it looks like trees grow, and it looks like animals walk, and it looks like people talk, and it looks like all the rest, nations go to war with each other, yada, yada, yada. And it's all just a show. It's all just... in other words, it's all Hashgacha Pratis, meaning Hashem, the master puppeteer, is controlling everything behind the curtain. And as soon as Hashem wants, nations will rise. And as soon as Hashem wants, nations will fall. And Hashem controls everything. This is the way. This is the simple. That's the simple understanding of Hashgacha Pratis. Chassidus says this is not correct. Chassidus says this is not correct. Why? Because in the example of the puppeteer and the puppets, there's two things. There's the puppeteer, there's the person who's controlling the puppets, and there's puppets. So would you say that the person who has the puppets is the same before and after? No! Before there were no puppets and now there are. Chassidus says when we talk about the Eibishter and the world, we're talking about something very, very different. We're not talking about the Eibishter controlling something else. We're not talking about the Eibishter having complete invested control on something else. There is nothing else. It's not the puppeteer with puppets. It's just the puppeteer with his hands. There's no puppets on the hands. It's just the Eibishter's hands themselves. That's it. There's nothing else besides for the Eibishter. Now you'll say, but we see puppets. Right? We see all sorts of superficial realities. That's also coming from Hashem. That also is something that Hashem wanted for the sake of His Galus Malchus, for the revelation of Hashem's Malchus, etc. All that is part of the Eibishter's plan. And Hashem Himself, the Eibishter Himself, is to be found even in this illusion as well. But make no mistake, says Chassidus, at no point is anything else introduced into the picture here other than the Eibishter himself. It's not possible for there to be anything else introduced here other than the Eibishter himself, because nothing else exists other than the Eibishter. And even when as much as we're going to sit here and we're going to say that the Eibishter created a world and created a world in which His presence is not manifest, and in which it looks, and in which there is Zman Umokam, and the purpose of this is that the world should nullify itself to Hashem, and it's all true. All of it takes place within a reality which is completely godly. Again, I mentioned this in the past, but one of the mashalim that people who teach these ideas in Tanya like to give, and the mashal I think has wisdom to it, is if a person is having a dream, right? So if a person is having a dream, in his dream there are conversations between people, there are all sorts of experiences, there are emotions, there are perhaps feeling of joy, feelings of pain. In the dream, there's many people, and all the people that the person is dreaming about, they all have their own emotions, etc., etc. And yet, as soon as the person wakes up, all of this ceases to exist. So you'll say, okay, but so where did all those people go? The people who existed in my dream, where did they all go when I wake up? All of their emotions that I had, that other people had, where do all those emotions go? All of the discoveries that were made, where do all of those go, right? The discoveries that you remember are still in your brain. But the discoveries that you don't remember, you'll say, well they're gone. Where'd they go? They didn't go anywhere because it was a dream, meaning it was all being experienced in our imagination. So by a human being, when we experience something in our imagination, it's literally just imagination. But when we say the Eibishter creates a world, and there is this concept of Yichuda Tataah, where the Eibishter's presence is to be found in everything. So this means that it's like all of existence exists within the Eibishter's dream, but instead of being a dream, it's the ultimate reality. It's a godly reality that all exists completely within Hashem. I want to finish with this. It takes the concept of Hashgacha Pratis to a whole new level. Right? The Rebbe writes in many places that the concept of Hashgacha Pratis is a yesod, it's foundational b'chlal in Torah mitzvahs. In all of Torah mitzvahs, the concept of Hashgacha Pratis is tremendously foundational. But the way it's explained according to Chassidus takes it to a whole new level. So what did Chassidus contribute to the concept of Hashgacha Pratis? Chassidus contributed to the concept of Hashgacha Pratis that it's not Hashem controlling something else. It's not Hashem intimately involved with something else. Right? People say, Hashgacha Pratis means that Hashem's presence is intimately involved in every detail of creation. That's not it according to Chassidus. It's true, but that's not it according to Chassidus. According to Chassidus, the pshat is that every detail, every nuance of creation is not just something that Hashem is involved with. It's not just something that Hashem is invested in. It's not a puppet that Hashem has his fingers in. There's no puppet. It absolutely is nothing more than an expression of Hashem's unity. That's it. Every parking ticket, every ingrown toenail, every blade of grass, every conversation we have with our spouses and with our children, every mitzvah that we do, every little bit of Torah that we learn for sure. But even the most simple and mundane experiences of our lives, everything is, quote, b'hashgacha pratis, meaning the very essence of Hashem is to be found, is present here, because actually, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Shaar, hayichud, all of this is taking place within godliness. Nothing else exists outside of it. And this, the Alter Rebbe says, is the deeper meaning of the concept of ani havaya lo shanisi. Hashem says, I haven't changed. Meaning, just as nothing else existed, there was nothing outside of Hashem before Hashem brought anything into existence. So too, in exactly the same way, after Hashem has brought all of reality into existence, it's the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Nothing else exists outside of Hashem. Everything that does exist, all exists within Hashem. All right. Thank you for being here. Emritz Hashem, to be continued next week.